All right, welcome back. We are live here, day 3 build 2015. So far, it's been pretty cool.
It's been awesome, man.
I'm here with Kevin Gallo. Tell us, what do you do for Microsoft?
I run the Windows Developer Platform team. I run the program management team there, so I'm responsible for the APIs and the tools and making sure that developers have what they need to build great apps for Windows.
That's awesome. So, look, the thing about Channel 9 Live that makes it the best are your questions, so please have them in. We want to see your questions. Let me start with one of my own. There is a new Universal Windows platform. What does that mean, and how do you distinguish that from Universal Windows apps?
So the Universal Windows platform is what is available across all of the Windows 10 device family. So we have lots of different family of devices, but the platform is available across all of them. And what a Universal Windows app is an app that's written that runs on top of that platform. Now, you may have done specialization to make that app work on one device versus the other. And so it might need some hardware capabilities on a device, but it's still a Universal Windows app because it runs on that Universal Windows platform.
Cool. So in the Universal Windows platform, what sort of family of products can we target?
Okay, let's see if I can get the full list of that.
I know, because I looked it up and I was like, I'm not going to.
I showed them all yesterday.
So many. There was this like wheel and then this. So what are some of the more exciting ones to start, and then maybe some of the ones we already know about?
So obviously we know about the HoloLens.
Right.
I think Surface Hub is a great collaborative device that's going to make sense in meeting rooms and showrooms. We have Xbox, obviously a great, well-known part of the family. You have your desktop, which includes your laptops, your 2-in-1s, PCs. Then you have phones, phablets, tablets, and things like that.
It's a pretty wide range.
The one without a screen, which obviously is IoT, will
Oh.
ultimately be probably the most prolific of them all.
Right, and so, this is a pretty wide range of options. Mm-hmm. How do we help developers build Universal Windows app such that they don't have to write a new thing for every one of those options? There was a lot of them.
Right, so I tried to show that yesterday, and I'll kind of repeat a little bit of the flow, which is, when you're building the application, you can share the code, but what you're going to use on each device may be for a different purpose. Mm-hmm. What I do with my phone might be different than what I want to do when I'm obviously on a larger screen like a TV or in a Surface Hub where I'm kind of collaborating.
Right.
So as you're building that, you want to think about, hey, what is the best device for this part of my task or this part of my workflow?
Got it.
And then tuning the experience for it. Now obviously you want to be able to run that on any of the other devices because, hey, I may not have a larger screen, so I want to be able to get it done on my phone. Or I'm on my screen, I'm too lazy to go walk over to my PC. Right. So you want to make it functional, but you do want to tune for the devices that can really make it a more productive experience.
Got it. So there was a promise that, hey, if you write a Universal Windows app, it'll just work everywhere. But do we necessarily want to do it that way?
So the APIs are available, and so you can write to those APIs. But it's also not that those APIs have to be available everywhere. There are APIs that are only available on certain devices, or if certain hardware is plugged in. Like, not everything has a pen.
Right.
My TV typically doesn't have a pen. And so you try to use the pen API, your app needs to take into account, well, if there is no pen, do I use a game controller, or do I use mouse keyboard, or what do I do in my app that can fall back? In some cases, like for camera, you're not going to have a fallback. My TV doesn't have a camera in most cases.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to go do that. And so you kind of tune the app for its purpose, but the API in the platform is consistent. So it's not like you have to relearn different things. And we have a new thing called API contracts. So you can say, hey, is this API available on the platform? If it is, then I can light up that code. If not, then I can do some fallback behavior.
That's like a really cool way of doing it, because the problem is if you're building for this device and it has its own thing, and you're building for this device and it has its own thing, you literally have to spin up 2 teams just for those 2 devices. But with consistent APIs, you can do a lot of good work.
Right. The shared portion of it all and the common code can be written. And then if you need some experts for the specialization, they can write that specialization code.
Got it. So we already have some questions coming in. When will more information on developing Universal Windows apps on Xbox be available?
So the Universal platform is the same across all the devices. So how you would build the application, the tools and all that is all available now. What I think you might be asking is, when can I have either an emulator or an Xbox or some way to test it and to see the experience there? And that we are not announcing yet, but soon we'll be discussing how you can get dev kits and those types of things.
So in essence, if you're building, if you want to target eventually Xbox, just build a Windows 10 app.
Yep.
And you're going to be well on your way to doing that.
Yep.
Cool. All right, another question. If I were to develop an app for Windows 10, would I have to implement support for keyboard, mouse, and touch?
So, you're not required to implement anything. I mean, it's really about where you're targeting. So if you wanted to ship a app just for phones, it only made sense on phones, you didn't really want to worry about mouse and keyboard, even those, attached to it, then you would go build that, tune it, optimize the user experience for it. By default, most of our controls will work with mouse and keyboard if they were attached, but that's not required to go do the work. We definitely don't want it to be wow, you have a lot of devices, so the first step in, I got to go make sure my UX works for all of it. No, I typically say, hey, pick a device, come in there, make it work great for that device and that form factor, that input model, then test it on the other ones, and incremental work as you find valuable to have across the entire family.
Right.
In most cases, it will just work, but needs a little bit of tuning.
So this brings up a larger philosophical question. We shouldn't really be building the same app across all the form factors because each form factor has specific things that will let it be good at something else.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the case. We talk about the one binary case, and
right.
I think Continuum is really why a lot of people want one binary. Is I have one app running, and I want to be in a tablet mode or desktop mode, or on the phone I want to be in phone mode or in desktop mode. That's where one binary really is an advantage. On the other hand, if you want to build a great app for one device, especially for, say, a dedicated device like IoT, you're going to specialize that, and it may really only work on one IoT device with a certain set of sensors, and that's what will work well for that application. Totally enable, you can build different binaries for each platform, or one.
With Windows 10, you can literally build whatever device you want when you're speaking IoT to do whatever you want.
Absolutely.
And so that's cool. All right.
And all your skills that you've learned and built apps with can all be reused.
Got it. Can any Win32 application in Windows 10 call Universal Windows Platform APIs, or does it need to be submitted to the Windows Store first?
So the first thing we wanted to make sure that when you use our new packaging and deployment, so when you basically take a Win32 application and put it into an AppX package, that you can use that across the board. You can sideload install that, or get it to the store and install it from the store. So the ability to build a package that deploys, that'll be inside the store or outside the store. It's just a new deployment model we've added for Win32 apps to leverage the same one we have for Universal. The second thing is, for the APIs, many of the APIs will work without having identity, but there are many APIs like being able to get notifications, push notifications, where we need to have an identity. In order to have an identity, you need to be registered with the store. And that you will need to be able to communicate, register with the store, have an identity, then we know which app to push the notification to.
Got
so
it.
It's not that we're doing it for no reason, like, oh, you have to be in the store. No, we need identity to push, to push like notifications.
Got
and
it.
a certain set of APIs.
So in essence, if you want to have some of the other benefits that the store brings, like identity, push notifications, you should. But if you don't care about that, you're making a drawing app that you don't care who's working
Yep.
on it. You're good.
And
So-
it's just a better install technology where we can install it, uninstall it, and keep it updated. And so that's really just a net benefit of a better installation.
So what do these .NET compiled apps look like when you're sort of wrapping them in an AppX? How does that process work?
So I don't know if I'd say I'm wrapping them in an AppX. Think of the AppX as a replacement for MSI.
Okay.
So MSI is the current way many people deploy applications. We now support AppX. You now take your app, put it into an AppX, and now you can deploy doing that. There are some constraints there that MSIs didn't have. MSIs, you can deploy kernel mode drivers and services. A few of those things we are not going to support coming from the store because we just don't feel like they lead to a good customer experience.
Of course.
And they can be abused.
Yeah. Well, that's good. All right, let's go to John. Are Universal Windows Platform .NET apps compiled to any CPU, or is there a binary for each architecture compiled separately?
We actually compile for each architecture separately.
That's awesome. Okay. Peter asked, why build a Universal Windows app now that iOS and Android code will run on Windows? That's a good question.
So that's a great question. We've been asked that one numerous times. So you should look at the iOS and Android code as a starting point. We use the bridge analogy because that's where you start, but we really want the destination is for you to be building a Universal Windows application. The main reason is you'll get a better UI. There's an adaptive UI that works with Continuum, it works with Cortana, it works with inking, so all of these cool features. The real goal of allowing you to leverage that code is, we don't want you to have to rewrite code that works, that has no value to rewrite.
Yeah.
Because if it just worked and I didn't need it and there's no benefit to rewriting it, why should I? So the goal there is to make sure that you can use that code and reuse it into your application, much like middleware. And this, we tend to see that people are going towards this model where they have a shared code base that they use across many different platforms, and then they build specialization for, especially in the UI, for each of the devices they're on, so they look best on that device. So if you want to build a great Universal Windows app, you'll start from that code, and then you'll add and spend all of your time on being better on Windows. I don't want you spending your time porting code that's good that actually adds no value on Windows itself.
Got it. And so if you just want to move it over as a starting point, but then you're not going to be able to take over some of the other features that Windows 10 gives you, so maybe it's time to start sort of bridging your way over.
Right, and that's what we tried to show a little bit of it in the keynotes is, hey, here's the app here, it's running, but look, I can get Xbox Live integration, I get Cortana integration, I get inking, we can, all these different great features, and that's where you should spend your time as developers, is making the app great.
Got it. So does the API contract mean I don't need conditional compilation to different devices, even if I use device-specific stuff?
Yes, that is the goal, is that you will not need to have if-defs to do the compilation. Instead, the app can adapt and dynamically light up different part functionality based on whether that hardware is available or that feature set is available.
And in my head, I mean, this makes a little bit more sense, because then you can write sort of your own way of saying, which device am I using?
Yep.
This is what I want to light up. This is what I don't want to light up.
Yep.
Okay, next, can Universal Apps communicate with WCF services? If so, are all the bindings supported? If not, what technology is recommended for communicating with a Windows service?
So I don't know enough about WCF, so I'm going to punt on that question.
Well,
I did some detail on that. I'm not sure I don't think it will not work, but I have not validated that directly.
That's okay.
myself.
So if you wanted to communicate, to your Azure backend services, what's the best way to do that using Windows apps?
I think there's a set of services, Azure services that we all hook into, a bunch of SDKs. They should all just work.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's move on. There's a couple more questions, but I have some questions that I want to ask you.
Sure.
It looks like during this sort of build conference, we've been talking about some really cool controls that you're adding to the Universal Windows platform. Can you talk a little bit about what those are?
So first of all, there's some that we didn't have everywhere that I think are great. I think Pivot's a great control. It works well now. It worked on phone. Now we have it on desktop. And it's just a great control for viewing different panels and like the tab control. But it's a nice interactive control. It works on mouse, keyboard, and touch, and game controller.
Got it.
We obviously have introduced split view control, which is very popular. You're seeing it in a lot of our applications.
Right.
Those are the standard UI ones, but some of the more rich ones, like the ink canvas, that just enable absolutely phenomenal capabilities, all wrapped up in a control to get editing, selection, all this stuff, rich drawing of ink, fluid ink, handling pen, touch, all that stuff is a great control. And of course the map control that I showed, which is just phenomenal, having aerial, having offline 2D capabilities, all that stuff you just want to work in your application, it's there.
All right, so the one that I saw that to me struck me was the ink control. There was some really cool stuff that you could really do. Like the demo you did was you circled something and started moving things around, and the code wasn't too complicated. Tell us a little about the API. I mean, it seems really well thought out.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work in our ink to layer the API. We have DirectInk is really the platform, and now we built on top of that ink canvas that bundles it all up into control. It knows about selection, it knows about being able to draw, it knows about editing. So this concept of being able to select and then edit, those concepts are built into the control very naturally and easily. So yeah, a little bit of code on the back end, and you can control that experience exactly as you want. It also does great palm rejection. It knows how to use touch versus pen. So it's got all those little nuggets in it to make it great. And it's actually the same control being used by Microsoft Edge, if I can get the name right. Almost said the code name.
Right.
And it's all built in there as well.
That's awesome. And so we're not just making things, we're making things and using them in our products and saying, hey, our customers could use this too.
Yep.
All right, so I've got some questions, but it looks like they're scrolled. So let's scroll down a little bit so I can see them. I want to get some questions. Let me ask about the map control. What are some of the coolest features that you think the map control exposes to Universal Windows platform developers?
So it's obviously all the user having great natural interactions with it, all built in. First of all, developers don't have to do anything. And then being able to data bind all of these pins and be able to layer multiple sets of pins and filter them naturally. And then you click on them, you can navigate into them greatly. It all just works great. I mean, it's a rich control.
That's awesome. I think the map is probably one of the best visualizations because it gives you that extra dimension of information that's really contextual. All right, so as they're getting the questions here scrolled, I want to ask you about IoT. when I bought my Raspberry Pi 2 because I was the first, I wanted one of those things. Does Windows really run on that? And what can you do with it? What kind of APIs are you exposing to work with IoT on Windows 10?
Yeah, so it is Windows. It literally is running the same version of Windows. It definitely is running the same version of Windows, and as you saw, it runs the same applications. So you can take those apps and run them. It also has ability to hook into several different types of buses, so that you can plug in sensors and peripherals, and then now you can have naturally just hook it right to that code in the Universal app. And even if those sensors are attached to a desktop or to other hardware, those APIs work.
Still gonna
so it's
work.
not just IoT devices, it's any devices now that have those buses on them now support it in the Universal
So
platform.
you just enumerate through the buses, or obviously there's some API contract that you have to
We've
write?
added several namespaces for those. You have to obviously look up, how do you identify this device, how do you communicate to it. But all that bus control that used to have to be built into a driver is now built into Windows itself.
Oh, that's going to be so nice, because nobody likes writing device drivers. I'm just saying.
We don't either.
I don't. Bitbender asks, will there be the ability for everyone to sideload Win 10 UAPs if he or she likes to, or will there be similar strict restrictions like WinRT apps?
So on the desktop, you'll be able to sideload them just like you do any Win32 application.
Okay.
So we'll have a common policy for any application that you have out there. So they'll be able to sideload. We will have restrictions on our other devices, and it will be device dependent.
Got it.
So on our phone, it's continued. You have to be developer unlocked, which we've streamlined and made a lot easier. But once you developer unlock, I think it's limited to 20 or there's a certain reasonable number. That's all you can sideload on the phone.
I got it.
But the desktop, it's an unlimited number.
I like making software. I just don't like the idea of having to worry about selling it and where do I put it. So I like the idea of having a store, but I mean, whatever you want to do, you can do.
Yep.
All right, can you talk a bit about how sideloading works? Not for development, but for production. So you just said sideloading works on the desktop. Is it just, can you build your own MSI like you did before?
Yeah, you basically, once you create an AppX package, there's an API that says add package, and it adds the package and installs it. It's as simple as you install it. I don't know if we have a handler yet where you can double click on them or not. That's simple, just an automatic handler, but it should be as simple. If you double click on an MSI, it launches an installer. You double click on an AppX and it installs it. You go to the program list, you uninstall it.
Well, that was kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah,
I like that. Okay, now that Win32 can be published in the Windows Store, will the current mandatory full Windows size splash screen present in Windows Store apps also be mandatory in Win32 Store published apps?
I hope not.
Yeah.
I haven't gone through the policies, but that would be a bad idea.
Yeah, my sense is that we just want people to use their old Win32 applications on Windows still.
Yeah, and they get access to all new APIs, they get them in the store. I mean, actually, a better way of saying this is I want my store to have all the apps everybody wants.
I like that.
There are a whole lot of Win32.NET applications that people want to go to the store and get. So make the store the one-stop place where they can go get everything that they're interested in getting, and that's good for them.
All right.
Not the malware stuff. They want us to keep protecting
Yeah,
themselves from
not
that.
the stuff we don't want. All right. So here's some more questions. Will ported Android iOS apps run on the whole universal Windows platform? PC, phone, Service Hub, HoloLens, IoT?
So there's slightly different answers there. For iOS or for the code written with Objective-C, that code is possible to run because when we actually compile it, it's directly compiled by Visual Studio, and the app will actually run across all those devices. Now, I'll be clear. I don't know that you'll have a great experience with the user interface that comes there because it was not necessarily designed. Our goal is to now enable you in the future to be able to take advantage of the Universal API, XAML and web, to be able to build new interfaces on top of that to do that. And we're working to unlock that functionality. But you can bring it and it will give you a user experience that will function. For Android apps that are running right now, they will actually only run on mobile.
Okay, got it.
But the reality is, mobile, both of these, anybody who's built for iOS and Android, it is a mobile experience that they've built. So that's probably what you're going to get a reasonable experience from.
Right.
If you want something better, you're going to have to use more of the universal platform, like XAML and those things, to make it better and appropriate.
Got it. Brandon asks, what are the core differences between Windows 8 WinRT-based apps and Windows 10 universal apps? It feels like there's a lot that's different.
It's just an evolution. We actually last year introduced the word universal apps, and I usually call that the universal Windows 8. And this is Universal Windows 10 platform. So it's just a version number change. And when you look at it, you have XAML, you have JavaScript support, you support C++, C#, VB, all the same stuff we supported before. We haven't deprecated anything. All we've done is add more APIs and add more functionality. The big change that's going to require some work by developers who did build universal Windows 8 apps is the control set did change. Because we had to merge and make sure that that app would work across phone and PC and it'd be a single binary,
right.
The controls did change. So when you move over, you might have to change some of the UI, the layouts changed slightly. So that's where the bulk of the work will go. I don't even think we deprecated that many APIs. It's mostly additive, but the control set changed, and that will need to. The apps will run if you don't change them. The app will run exactly as they did. But if you want to do an upgrade the project from an 8 project to a 10 project for Visual Studio in Visual Studio, then you'll have to go deal with some of the changes that happen there in the UX.
Got it. All right. Another question, what do I need to develop an Xbox app, not a game? An Xbox app and not a game. I got a little tongue-tied there.
So it's Visual Studio. Basically, you're just building a universal Windows app. It'll be the same exact tools. You'll just be able to go there and say, connect to the Xbox, and you'll be able to deploy the Xbox once we get the developer kits.
Got it. All right, another question. If I want to develop a cross-platform .NET Core library, do I still need to make it a PCL library, or will .NET Core eventually be truly cross-platform without the need for API subsetting? That's a very technical question.
Yes, and I don't actually know exactly the details to that one, so I'm not going to try to answer that one. It seems like you probably will, but I'm not positive exactly what's in Core that's not in the PCL subsetting.
If you build a file new universal Windows app, that you're guaranteed that is going to be able to work across all the platforms. Is that the case?
So is this a question for .NET Core?
Yeah, this is .NET Core, and
I'm not sure about
it. Yeah, the answer to that is we're not sure.
Okay, so you asked me this question.
This is a
new refining it.
Yeah, I'm refining it a little bit because people might be, well, what does that mean? If you do file new Windows 10 app, that will just work across all.
Oh yeah, if you build a universal application, the set of .NET that's in the universal application model will run across everything. And we have a very large set of the APIs we've added. I don't know if anybody's talked about that specifically, but we have added to the universal API set a large number of things that came from .NET, large number of additional Win32 APIs. The goal being that if you're going to move from Win32 or .NET and you want to build universal, we want you to reuse as much of your code. It's the same philosophy you had for iOS, Android, and web is reuse as much of the code that existed that we could and just bring that into the universal Windows platform.
Got it. Here's a really good question from Scott. I'm about to release a Windows 8.1, Phone 8.1 app, 2 to 3 weeks. Should I wait and convert to universal Windows app?
Well, there are no devices today out there other than running by insiders that would run that universal Windows app. So I would say I would release your current product to all your customers, and then once we release the platform, then you can upgrade it to a universal Windows app.
Yeah, but you might also be able to do an experimental branch and use Visual Studio 2015 RC and say, hey, let me upgrade and see what happens.
So you should go do that, but I would not. He said, wait about releasing.
No, release now.
Release now?
Early and often.
Actually, I'll be more clear. You should go release that. Try to upgrade and give us feedback on how well it works and what breaks.
I like that.
And then tell us if it doesn't work or not. So it's really about, release the product, but tell us what we need to go do. Tell us if you're running into problems, things that we can go fix now before we release to make that process of upgrading your app easier.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to ask a question because this is something that I'm not a very good designer. So what are some things that XAML affords me that will help me, like some of the controls, that will help me be able to build something that truly works cross-device?
So we've spent an insane amount of time with our design team, getting user feedback, with our controls team, making sure that the controls that we build work nicely and scale across all the different form factors and the different input modalities. And so our default control set we feel very good about. Now, what I really think is the base controls that you build, your buttons, your scrolls, your sliders, those are the most important.
Right.
And many times when you move between different device form factors, the top level navigation, the one that you interact with, that I think you tend to tune more, but you want all the base controls to just work.
Got it.
And so we've did the work so the base controls function naturally, and you can just decide kind of that top level view. Do you want it navigated, laid out? So if you look at all the examples I did, I kind of move things around a little bit, things top and bottom, move top of each other. And so with the relative panel and adaptive state triggers, you can do those lightweight layout changes, and all the controls underneath them just work. So all you change is the top level panel, and almost everything else will adjust.
Is there a way, like for example, if I'm building, if I'm going to target the tablet and the phone, because that's what I want my app to do, is there a way in XAML to say, am I on the phone or am I on the tablet, or do you have to make a XAML page for each of the windows that you're going to be showing?
In the bits today, I don't know that there is a way of figuring it out. It's a little complex. We're going to simplify it and streamline it.
Got it.
We do find that if you're on a phone versus a tablet, I call it one-handed mode.
Got it.
I want to have really a one-handed mode versus a tablet. You definitely have two-handed modes, and you can dock things side to side. So there's a slightly different interaction between the two. And yes, you'll be able to say, hey, which state am I in? And we'll find an adaptive trigger, and then you can adjust your user interface.
So talk a little bit about adaptive triggers. What are those?
So adaptive triggers are fired when you basically set up several sets of states. And when those states fire, you can change attributes on any of the layouts. You don't have to write any code. So a designer can go in there and say, okay, when I'm smaller, I want it to dock to the sides and one on top of each other, because I'm in portrait mode typically. And when I'm in horizontal, vertical, I want to be able to landscape mode. I want them side by side, and then the width. And so those simple things, all you do is set up some triggers. You tell it what attributes you want changed, and all those things are changed for you.
Got it. All right, here's another question. To check if a device-dependent API is present, you currently require us to query it with a literal string of API class. Well, this is like a long statement. That seems like a really good feature request. Will you ask Mads Torgerson? Yeah, I'll ask him. We are going to go to lunch today. To extend the new name of Express. Yeah, I mean, that's a long question. Yeah.
Simply a good feature request. We'll take it into account and see.
So the question is, how do you check for device dependence?
Right now what we do is it's called an API contract. Actually, there's a couple of different ways. The way we recommend is check with an API contract, because the challenge, if you ask for a specific device, that device may add that functionality later on, and then your check is incorrect.
Right.
So it's check for whether or not the API is present. If those API contract is present, then call the APIs. If not, do some alternate behavior. We will add the ability to query and ask, hey, which device am I on? Because sometimes the actual device matters, because you want to make different business decisions based on the device.
It feels like more important, it's what's your screen size and what do you have available, and that really should define your...
It does in some cases, but for example, there's the status bar on the phone. There is no status bar on any of the other devices.
Got it.
But you want to be able to talk to that status bar. So you'll do say, well, hey, if the status bar contract is there, then I want to go tell the status bar to show different items.
Well, we are running out of time. Where can people go to find out more and get started?
I think it's dev.windows.com, and just go there and learn.
What's the most exciting thing you think in the new set of things we're rolling out? What are you most excited about?
Wow, that's now I got to pick one, and somebody else will tell me what I didn't pick.
Well, maybe pick 2 or 7 or 12.
I think it's most powerful for developers that they've asked for is because we have this breadth of hardware. I think without adaptive UI, it'd be challenging. Okay. So I do think all this stuff work we've done in XAML, we've done a lot of performance work. I'd say it's most critical for developers to be able to target this ecosystem, this breadth of hardware that we've got. So it's not a complex, but a very straightforward and simple problem.
Well, thanks so much for spending some time with us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you after the break. Take care.
Thanks.